Alright, welcome to the module on Chinese art from prehistory to the year 1300. So first I'd like to ask, what is your impression of Chinese art? Most likely we have a version that's been digested and transformed by Western culture. China is an immense geographical region whose borders have grown and shrunk over the centuries, containing a diverse group of ethnicities, religions, historical ruling parties, time zones, and ecological environments. The whole concept of Chinese art, however, is really a notion that only began in the 1800s. It is a term that can encompass a wide variety of extremely different intermingling practices. With a broad view for this topic can be divided into three areas of artistic expression: art created for burial practices, Buddhist art, and art for the courtly elite. It is also important to note that three major world religions and worlds of thought that influenced Chinese culture during this period were Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism. Since their conception, the philosophical systems of Confucianism and Taoism have worked hand in hand with Chinese culture. Confucianism developed during the Zhou dynasty, in which Confucius was born, which was circa 521 years BCE. It was a non-metaphysical humanist system. Confucian is about a man's place in society, a society that can be perfect if people conduct themselves perfectly. It is also a conservative and hierarchical system, which places men over women, and the ruling class over peasants, without any chance for upward social mobility. Seemingly at odds with Confucianism is Taoism. Its origin is attributed to Laozi, who lived during the 5th century BCE and is thought to be the author of the Tao Te Ching, also known as the Book of the Way and its Power. Whereas Confucianism is about a man's place in society, Taoism ignores society and instead concentrates on a man's relationship to the natural world, the Tao, in which the man's goal is to live in perfect harmony. All natural phenomena can be explained by the yin and the yang, opposing forces in nature that blend together in perfect harmony. The yin is a female, soft, slow, cold, etc., and the yang is a male, hard, fast, hot, etc. During the Han Dynasty, the year 206 BCE to 220 CE, Taoism began to incorporate magical rites to help each follower reach immortality. Deities also play a role in these rites and have eventually become part of Chinese pop culture. So Buddhism came to China in the year 65 CE and introduced presuppositions that differed from the dominant Chinese philosophies. Buddhism operates with the same notions of samsara and karma, the belief that life is an endless cycle of rebirth and deeds from past lives determine an individual's place in this life and future lives. Because Chinese culture already had established concepts of the afterlife, these new ideas were not readily accepted. The influence of foreign rulers was needed in order to bring Buddhism into cultural prominence. So that's some background. Here's some examples of the visual art made in China. The earliest cultures in the Henan, Jiangxi, and Jiangxi provinces along the Yellow River in China developed during the Neolithic period, in which civilizations made functional objects with decorations. The earthenware funerary jar, featured here, was decorated with slip. It's a type of ceramic liquid, and that's one such example of some funerary jars that could be found inside of a tomb. So bronze vessels like this U were produced during the Bronze Age after the Neolithic period. And the Bronze Age was a very long period of time that China is really well known for. But this particularly characterizes the Shang period, which existed from 1500 to 1050 BCE. And the Shang culture had the most highly developed bronze technology in all of the ancient world. And the Shang kingdom was a single political entity ruled from a sequence of capitals in what is now known as the Henan province. So here bronze was used for weapons, chariot fittings, horse trappings, and for vessels like these. And bronze vessels were used during special banquets in order to honor the deceased member of a high society, in addition to human and animal sacrifices. And therefore, all of the deceased needs were met in the afterlife. The nobles performed these sacrifices and rituals in order to ensure that their success would be done with appeasing their deceased ancestors. The Yu is a bronze wine vessel, and it was used during great banquets with lavish food and drink to honor the ancestors. And the vessels were then subsequently buried with other members of the elite. The higher the person's rank, the more the objects would be buried with them. The making of the bronze vessels suggests a higher status in society and urban centers of production. So this might have come from a thriving city center. The Shang Dynasty bronzes were covered completely with decoration to utilize the many zoomorphic motifs with surfaces that usually display horror vacui, which is a fear of empty spaces. So if we look at the face of this vessel, you can see it is just covered in different carvings and ornamentation. And one of those motifs found here is the Teoti, which is translated to an ogre mask. It's a symmetrical composite zoomorphic design. Zoomorphic meaning it's an animal and human transformation kind of coming together. And it's a full face mask that can be divided down the nose, with both sides depicting one-legged bird-like creatures. The exact meaning of this Taoti is not known, but because it appears so often on early Chinese vessels, it is apparently an auspicious motif. If you want more information on the Shang Dynasty, you should check out this teacher's guide. It's linked in the transcript, but it goes over the Great Bronze Age of China at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. So, you guys may already be familiar with these terracotta soldiers, but the emperor who commissioned them maybe not so much, so I'll go over that. So the first emperor of China was Qin Shi Huangdi, or just Emperor Qin, and he reigned from the year 221 to 210 BCE. He was one of the first emperors to unite the empire, and the first to give himself the title of imperial sovereign. He was anti-Confucian and is thought to have burned all of their books and killed their scholars in a live burial. How fun. He also standardized weights, measures, and writing systems. He built roads to move his massive armies and started building the Great Wall. So under Qin's rule, this period was the first time that China was thought of as a cultural entity. A farmer accidentally found this tomb of the terracotta soldiers in 1974. Since then, thousands of terracotta soldiers have been uncovered in military formation, with several thousand soldiers estimated in total. The Chinese government is reticent to do any more excavating, since the terracotta soldiers can easily break. We don't know for sure if that's the actual reason. That's just what the official statement is. The soldiers are all life-size, from 5 to 6 feet tall, and originally they were painted to enhance their lifelike appearance of the figures. You can see that here. So although terracotta is not a luxurious material, the massive scale of this tomb's construction was incredible. So it took hundreds of tons of firewood, and massive kilns were needed in order to fire all these figures. It took hundreds of workers. There were there was a prefabrication of the parts, so they were set up in different segments. You had a plinth, a set of legs, a torso, two separate arms, two hands, and a head. And then to increase the number of unique combinations, there were 3 plinth styles. 2 types of leg sets, 8 torsos, and 8 heads. The hands were composed of smaller modeled parts, and the facial features and hair were customized per figure. That's so crazy. And the consequent variety of soldiers with the lifelike appearances helped better fulfill their roles as guardians of the master of the netherworld. Master in the netherworld. So they were trying to protect Qin in the netherworld when he's, deceased and in the afterlife. So this emperor's unprecedented rule made the construction of this massive tomb possible, and it helped to immortalize him in history for generations to come. So in addition to this elaborate tomb for the emperor, other elite members of the populace were preoccupied with their immortality during the Han Dynasty, which is the years 206 BCE to 220 CE, which can be evidenced in the Ma Wangwai tomb complex. The preoccupation caused myths, miracles, and magic to be incorporated into Taoism, which previously had emphasized living in harmony with nature. Now it starts to take on a little bit more magic. So one of these objects that's buried with these kind of cultural elite or rulers was this funerary banner. And it was found in the tomb draping the inner coffin of the Marquise, which is the wife of Marquis of Dai, the chancellor of the kingdom of Chengsa. So she's obviously, very high status. She's married to a chancellor. And this banner was considered to be the precursor to hanging scrolls, which were very prominent in Chinese culture after the 11th century. And we'll go over that a little bit more. And then that spreads over into Japan as well. And we can talk about that when we get to that module. But we can interpret this in terms of Confucianism and Taoism. So the banner has 3 levels. The upper level represents the heavens, the middle area represents the earth, and the bottom represents the netherworld, or the world of the afterlife. So the upper level depicts a sky filled with mythical creatures that recall Taoist mythology. There's a raven in the sun, a toad on the moon, and the celestial dragons fly through the heavens. And that's explained in the Taoist texts. And the middle section shows Confucian scholars bowing down to the elderly. A well-fed marquise with her female attendants is also featured in this middle section. So this section uses hieratic scale as a way to portray the hierarchy of Confucian society, meaning that the most important figures are the largest. We saw that a lot in our early modules on scale, where gods are portrayed as really big and then the regular people are tiny compared to them, or sometimes even just a little bit smaller. But that's the hierarchical scale. So the lower portion of the banner depicts men performing rituals with bronze vessels, a tradition that developed during the Shang Dynasty to honor the deceased. This tradition is clearly adapted here as a Confucian tradition, and Confucianism stresses the respect to the elders, to the ancestors, and to the hierarchy in society. A serpent beast supports the netherworld, which is another visual interpretation of Taoist mysticism. I'm going to pause here, and then we'll continue on to the next video.